Earl Grey is the lawyer for Thomas Lane, one of the officers charged with aiding and abetting the murder of George Floyd. And he joins us now from Minneapolis. Good morning to you, Mr. Grey.
Good morning.
We've just spoke to Benjamin Crump, who is the attorney for the Floyd family. They are not happy that Derek Chauvin is only getting a charge of second-degree murder and want it to be first-degree murder. What is your reaction to that?
I do not represent Officer Chauvin or Mr. Chauvin. I haven't paid much attention to what he should be charged with or what he shouldn't be charged with.
Well, you've seen the video, right?
Mike, yes, I saw the video.
So,
Yes.
I mean, what's your professional assessment as to whether what we saw for nearly 9 minutes constitutes first or second-degree murder?
Are you talking about Chauvin and not Thomas Lane?
I'm talking about Chauvin first, yeah.
Yes. Well, my assessment of that, I have not thought about it because I'm not representing him. I'm representing Thomas Lane. I haven't looked at the video to make, excuse me, to make an assessment about what Chauvin did. If you want to ask that question, you probably should talk to his lawyer.
Well, we're gonna do that, but I've got to say I'm slightly aghast that you represent one of the 4 police officers involved in this case, and you say you haven't looked at that video properly to assess whether Derek Chauvin may have been responsible.
I did not say I had not looked at the video. I said I did not look at the video with the intent to analyze Mr. Chauvin.
Okay.
I looked at the video, and it was my client's body camera that I looked at to assess his involvement and his culpability.
Okay. I think, Earl Grey, what you're trying to say is that legally you have a responsibility, of course, in the defence of Thomas Lane, one of the police officers, and not for Derek Chauvin. I think maybe it might be misunderstood by viewers that you don't show an interest in the video or the actions of Derek Chauvin. But what I think people will be asking, because you are representing Thomas Lane, the question that will be on many people's minds is that the main perpetrator was Derek Chauvin because he held his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Why didn't Thomas Lane step in to stop him?
Okay, well, Thomas Lane was on his 4th day of being a police officer. Chauvin had 20 years as a police officer. I apologize for my voice. It's late here. It's not early. Anyway, Chauvin had 20 years. A police department is ran like a military service. You have officers, you have experienced police officers, and then you have rookies, and you have officers that are on the job 4 days. In any event, my client said twice, "Shall we roll him over?" One time he thought he was suffering, I can't remember exactly what he said, a delirium. My client was down by George Floyd's feet. He was not up by the neck. He was holding his feet because George Floyd had resisted being handcuffed and he had resisted going into the back of the squad car.
Okay, but
your client must have heard, as we've all heard, it must have heard George Floyd crying out 16 times in 5 minutes that he couldn't breathe. When you hear a human being say, "I can't breathe," that number of times, why don't you just say, "This guy can't breathe, we need to stop him dying"?
Well, what would you have done? He said twice, "Shall we roll him over?"
You know what I would have done? I would have got up and I would have said, "I'm really sorry, but this guy is dying in front of us, and I'm not going to be party to it." That's what a humane reaction would be.
That's very good. That's a very good hindsight, but you're not a police officer.
It's not hindsight.
Wait a minute. Don't you interrupt me all the time, or do I get to talk and you can argue? You're not a police officer. A police officer is trained to follow orders, and he was following his belief that they were doing right.
Thomas
He was not believing in abetting crime.
Okay, Thomas Lane is a police officer, of course, and I know that your argument is he was a rookie and had only done 4 shifts and he was up against a man who had 20 years of service. But underneath that man's knee was a man who was dying. And I think a lot of people think common humanity, basic humanity would have required someone to step in. But apart from that, can I just say, there is a policy in the police force that is a duty to intervene, saying officers are required to either stop or attempt to stop another sworn employee when force is being inappropriately applied or is no longer required. So the argument that he was a junior police officer is already covered by the fact that he had a duty to intervene, whatever the status of the other officer.
You obviously are very opinionated and biased. What you do not understand is what goes through the head of a police officer on his 4th day in a situation where the individual he had arrested originally was under the influence of drugs. He was resisting being handcuffed. He resisted going back into his, he resisted being in a squad car. When he was on the ground, he was resisting. While he was resisting going into the squad car, he also said then, "I can't breathe." He claimed he had claustrophobia. He resisted then. He's lying on the ground. I agree. He said he can't breathe. And that is why my client said to Chauvin, "Should we roll him over?" He said that twice.
Your client pulled
my
a gun.
client did nothing wrong.
Yeah, well, we're going to come to what your client did or didn't do.
My client went into the ambulance and tried to revive this guy.
It was too late, unfortunately,
My
wasn't
client
it?
had no intent to murder this man, and that's what he's charged with.
Your client was one of your client, with respect, your client was one of four police officers who held down George Floyd and rendered him unconscious, and carried on holding him down for nearly another 3 minutes.
And my client down by the feet knew that he was totally unconscious and carried on. He didn't know that.
Your client heard a man shout 16 times, "I can't breathe." He heard passers-by.
Did he shout that? Did he shout that, really? He didn't say, "I can't breathe." Why did he say, "I can't breathe" when they were trying to put him into the squad car?
Passers-by was shouting at the police officers, "Get off him, he can't breathe." They were further away. They were further away than your client was.
Let me ask you another question. Why didn't any of the other people standing there intervene? If you're saying anybody should have intervened.
Why didn't your client, whose job is to protect people, why didn't your client protect George Floyd?
You know, it's really too bad you are so opinionated.
Yeah, isn't it awful?
You're wrong.
Isn't it awful to have an opinion about a black man being killed at the hands of your client?
Now you put the race issue into it, and there is no race issue here.
Really?
Two of the 4 officers, one is black and the other one's Asian. Answer that one.
I don't have to answer any one. Do I?
I don't have to answer anything to you either, because you obviously don't know what you're talking about.
I'll tell you what, I do know what I'm talking about.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to bed. Good night.
Okay.
Do you realise that your whole performance here merely tells the world how disgusting, actually, even the people representing these police officers are?
Well, thank you for the compliment, because if
it wasn't a compliment.
Really, I thought it was. If you think I'm going to sit here and listen to your talk bad about my client, I'm not listening to that. If you would have told me that an hour ago when I did agree to stay up, I would have not agreed to. I don't need
your client pulled a gun. Your client pulled a gun on George Floyd 90 seconds after he first met him. Why did he do that?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because he did not show his hands. Once he put his hands on his steering wheel, he put the gun in his holster. Why did he do that? Because now his hands were shown. They're on the steering wheel. There. Good night. Happy birthday.
Look, everybody is entitled to legal representation.
You know what? Yeah, he needs another lawyer, and that guy shouldn't be practicing law.
But
that was one of the most disgraceful interviews I've ever watched with a lawyer, probably in my entire career.
Yeah, that was quite an extraordinary interview.
Absolutely disgraceful.